So you want to invade Britain, and for once, your staff's enthusiasm is understandable because you can see the target. Stand on the coast of France on a clear day, and there they are, the White Cliffs, 21 miles away. That is the entire moat, 21 miles. Armies have crossed wider rivers, so let me give you the defendant's record before we open the file. In the last 1,000 years, the number of times this island has been conquered by force is one. Once. In a year so famous that every schoolchild on the island can recite it. Since then, the mightiest empire of the 16th century sent the most famous fleet in history against it, and the defenders struck a medal afterward crediting the wind. The conqueror of Europe parked an army on that French coast for 2 years, staring at those cliffs, and never sailed. And the most feared war machine of the 20th century wrote the invasion order, set the date, gathered the barges, and canceled the whole thing without landing a single soldier. 3 superpowers, 3 centuries, 21 miles, 0 conquests. Today, we audit your plan against that record, and at the end, I will read you the itemized bill. Stay for the final line item, because it is not a fleet or a fortress. It is a handwritten letter, locked in a safe, in a place your entire military has never once managed to find. First, the case for the invasion, because it is real. Britain's army today is around 73,000 regular soldiers, commonly described as its smallest since the era when Napoleon was the one doing the threatening. The civilian population is, by law, one of the most disarmed on Earth. The island grows barely half of what it eats and imports much of what it burns, which means it lives permanently on ships. The capital sits less than 100 miles from the landing beaches, and the empire that once made this island the center of the world is gone, along with the 1,000-ship navy that guarded it. Every word of that is true. Your staff should frame it, and then they should explain why every conqueror in 1,000 years read the same brief, looked at the same 21 miles, and either drowned, turned back, or never dared sail. Because the moat is a lie of scale. 21 miles of the English Channel is not 21 miles of water. It is one of the most violent moods in the North Atlantic, a funnel of tides, currents, fogs, and sudden gales that has been drowning confident sailors since antiquity. It is also, today, the busiest shipping lane on Earth, hundreds of vessels a day, which makes it the single most watched, tracked, and censored stretch of sea in existence. Nothing crosses it unnoticed. Nothing has crossed it unnoticed for a very long time, and the one man who did solve it 1,000 years ago needed the luck of the millennium to do it. In September of 1066, England's King Harold destroyed a Norwegian invasion army at Stamford Bridge in the north, then learned that William of Normandy had landed in the south and force-marched his exhausted army roughly 250 miles to fight a second battle in 3 weeks. He nearly won anyway. The only successful invasion of England in 1,000 years required the defender to fight 2 invasions in 20 days at opposite ends of the country. That is the sole entry in the win column. Everything since is your case history. Receipt number 1, 1588. The invader is Philip II of Spain, master of the First Empire on which the sun never set, the superpower of the age. His instrument is the Armada, around 130 ships carrying some 30,000 men, with orders to sweep up the channel, join hands with a Spanish army of nearly 30,000 veterans waiting in Flanders, and escort it across on barges. Notice, and file for later, that even the 16th century superpower did not believe it could simply sail over and land. The channel demanded a plan, and the plan had a hole in it. There was no deep water port where fleet and army could actually meet. So the Armada anchored off Calais, waiting, and after dark, the English sent in 8 ships they were happy to lose, packed with tar and gunpowder and set alight. The fire ships killed no one. They did something worse. In the panic, Spanish captains cut their anchor cables to escape. And remember those lost anchors, because they are about to matter. Battered in battle off Gravelines the next day and unable to fight back down a channel of hostile wind, the Armada was forced to go home the long way, north, around Scotland, around Ireland, into the September storms of the North Atlantic. And there, ships that had cut away their anchors found they could not hold position off the rocks. Dozens wrecked along the Irish coast. Of the proud 130, roughly half never saw Spain again, and of the 30,000 men, as many as 15,000 died, the great majority not by English guns, but by sea, rock, hunger, and fever. Which is why the victors struck a medal whose Latin inscription is usually rendered in 5 words: God blew and they were scattered. Read that carefully. The winning side's official position was that the weather deserves the credit. Philip tried again in 1596. Storms scattered that fleet too. He tried again in 1597. Same verdict. The Channel does not merely defeat invasions, it repeats itself. Receipt number 2, and this one is the most instructive kind of failure. The invasion that was perfectly prepared and never happened. 1803. Napoleon Bonaparte, shortly to be master of everything from Madrid to Warsaw, assembles the army of England on the cliffs at Boulogne. Well over 100,000 of the finest soldiers in Europe, drilled daily, staring at Britain. Behind them, more than 2,000 purpose-built landing craft. And here is the detail your naval staff should circle. Most of them were, in essence, river barges, flat, slow, and helpless in a seaway. Napoleon is supposed to have said that if he could be master of the Channel for 6 hours, he would be master of the world. He was probably right. He got 2 years and never got the 6 hours. Because between the barges and the beaches lay the Royal Navy, and everything Napoleon tried, including a grand transatlantic decoy to lure it away, dissolved against the same arithmetic. In August of 1805, he gave up, wheeled the Army of England away from the coast, and marched it against Austria instead. 10 weeks later, off Cape Trafalgar, Admiral Nelson caught the combined French and Spanish fleet and settled the question for a century. Around 20 enemy ships taken or destroyed, British ships lost, 0, and Nelson himself killed at the moment of his victory. The conqueror of Europe, the greatest military mind of his age, with the largest army he ever pointed at anyone, never put one soldier in a boat. A British admiral of the day, as the line is usually attributed, put the whole file in one sentence. I do not say they cannot come. I only say they cannot come by sea. Receipt number 3, the closest call in 1,000 years. Summer 1940. France has fallen in 6 weeks. The British Army has just escaped at Dunkirk, and understand what escaped means. 338,000 men came home, and nearly everything heavier than a rifle stayed on the beach. The tanks, the artillery, the trucks, an army's entire equipment abandoned in France. Britain stands alone, disarmed, and 21 miles away waits the most feared military machine in the world. This is the moment. If the island can ever be taken, it is now. On July 16th, Hitler signs Directive Number 16, Prepare Operation Sea Lion, the landing in England. And in that same directive, the invader himself writes the precondition, the honest clause that governs everything. First, the Air Force must destroy the Royal Air Force. Why? Because the German Navy barely existed anymore. The spring campaign in Norway had gutted it. That summer, it could deploy roughly 10 destroyers, 10 against a Royal Navy that kept dozens within a day's sail of Dover and the largest fleet in the world behind them. The German army, planning cheerfully, treated the operation like a wide river crossing. The German Navy's own staff, reading the same plans, the towed river barges crawling at walking pace. The 10 destroyers, the home fleet, regarded it privately as something close to suicide. The only way the sums worked at all was total command of the sky. So the sky became the battlefield, and through August and September 1940, the Battle of Britain was fought, the first great battle in history waged entirely in the air. And Britain, disarmed on the ground, turned out to have built the one weapon that mattered, a chain of radar stations along the coast wired into a central control system, the first integrated air defense network on Earth, which meant the defenders rose to fight only when and where the raids were coming, spending nothing on patrols, wasting nothing on guesses. Against it flew the Luftwaffe, and in it fought the men Churchill called the Few, about 3,000 aircrew, and here is a detail worth your attention. 1 in 5 of them was not British at all. Poles, Czechs, Canadians, New Zealanders, and more, including a Polish squadron, 303, that became the highest claiming Hurricane squadron of the entire battle. Through late August, the Luftwaffe hammered the airfields and sector stations, and Fighter Command bent. Then, in early September, the German bombing switched to London, and many historians argue that switch relieved the airfields at the decisive moment. On September 15th, the Luftwaffe launched its maximum effort and was broken up and beaten in full view of the capital. 2 days later, September 17th, Hitler postponed Sea Lion indefinitely. It was never unpostponed. And while the fighters fought, the Royal Air Force's bombers were quietly burning the invasion itself in its cradle, striking the barge fleets in the Channel ports until around 1/10 of them were sunk or damaged at their moorings. On the island, the defense had become total. 1.5 million volunteers in the Home Guard by midsummer. 28,000 concrete pillboxes poured across the countryside, thousands of which are still standing in English farm fields today. Every road signpost in the country taken down so that an invader could not navigate, the beaches wired and mined. The largest invasion never launched died of 2 sums: a sky it could not win, and a sea it never once contested. Not one German soldier landed under arms. Now the honesty section, because this defendant's file carries asterisks, your researchers will find them, and this court deals in evidence. Asterisk 1, 1688, and it is a big one. A Dutch fleet, by some measures larger than the Armada, crossed the Channel, landed more than 15,000 troops in the West Country unopposed, and within weeks, the King of England had fled abroad. A successful crossing, a fallen king. So why is it not the Second Conquest? Because William of Orange sailed with a written invitation in his pocket, signed by 7 of England's most powerful men, asking him to come. Because the English army did not fight him, it defected to him, including its best general. And because the crown was then handed to him by Parliament, on Parliament's terms. It was not a conquest, it was a job offer delivered by fleet. And it fits a pattern. 5 centuries earlier, a French prince held London itself for about a year, also invited in by rebellious barons, and was dropped the moment they changed their minds. In 1,000 years, the door has opened only from the inside. Asterisk 2, 1667. A Dutch squadron sailed up the Medway, burned the English fleet at its own moorings, and towed the flagship home as a souvenir, arguably the worst humiliation in the Royal Navy's history. Note what it proves. The moat permits raids. Note what followed. No invasion. And asterisk 3, the actual last invasion of Britain, which deserves to be told at every staff college as a warning about morale. In 1797, some 1,400 French troops, a good many of them recruited from prisons, landed in Wales. They discovered a recently shipwrecked cargo of wine, and the invasion largely dissolved into the drinking of it. Within 2 days, they surrendered, and local legend insists they did so in part because Welsh women in traditional tall black hats and scarlet cloaks, watching from the hills, were mistaken at a distance for endless columns of redcoats. And that one shoemaker named Jemima Nicholas personally rounded up a dozen invaders with a pitchfork. The legend is the locals' version. The surrender is a matter of record. The last invasion of Britain was defeated, the story goes, by Kenneth Ware. Which brings us to the island you would actually face. The moat has been upgraded. Britain today operates 2 aircraft carriers, the largest warships it has ever built, flying stealth jets, screened by destroyers, built for exactly one job, killing aircraft and missiles over the sea. Beneath the water run the astute boats, nuclear-powered hunting submarines whose profession is convoys like yours. The air above the channel belongs to Typhoon squadrons on permanent quick reaction alert and, a detail your planners must not skip, to American fighter wings already stationed on the island, because Britain is a founding member of the largest military alliance in history, and your first shot at Dover is a declaration of war on all of it. Your smartest analyst will now say what smart analysts have said for a century. Do not invade the island, starve it. It imports half its food. Correct. And audited. That strategy has been attempted twice, at full industrial scale, by submarine. In 1917, the U-boats came close enough that, by some accounts, the island was down to weeks of grain. In the Second World War, they tried again for 6 years, and Churchill later wrote that the U-boat peril was the only thing in the entire war that ever really frightened him. Both campaigns failed against escorted convoys, and the modern version begins with a small prerequisite: defeating the combined navies of the Atlantic Alliance first. The starvation option is real, spoken for, and beaten twice. So, the bill. Line 1, the crossing. 21 miles that defeated the superpower of 1588, the superpower of 1805, and the superpower of 1940. Now the most surveilled water on Earth, under missiles, submarines, and 2 air forces. Line 2, the precondition. The last invader wrote it himself. Win the sky first, and the sky over this island has been contested exactly once and held. Line 3, the siege option. Attempted twice by U-boat, failed twice, now gated behind a war with an entire alliance. Line 4, the garrison. At the standard 20 to 25 soldiers per 1,000 inhabitants. Occupying 68 million people costs you roughly 1.5 million troops, on an island where their every meal, bullet, and spare part crosses the same contested water that already ate 3 fleets. Line 5, the prize. London's treasure is not in vaults, it is confidence, contracts, and law. A financial capital whose entire value evaporates on the day tanks cross it. You are invading a bank made of trust. And trust does not surrender. It simply leaves. And now the final line item, the letter. Since 1969, without missing a single day in over 55 years, Britain has kept at least 1 ballistic missile submarine on patrol somewhere in the deep ocean. Location unknown to nearly everyone, including most of its own government, never once found by an adversary. Inside each boat's safe lie the letters of last resort. Instructions written by hand by the sitting Prime Minister, to be opened only if Britain has been destroyed and its government is gone, and destroyed unread whenever power changes hands. Consider what that does to your perfect scenario. You cross the impossible water, you win the sky, you take London, you decapitate the state entirely, and somewhere under the Atlantic, a commander your forces have never located opens a safe and reads the handwriting of a dead prime minister. On this island, even total victory does not end the war. The war outlives the government you killed. The verdict of this court: invasion of Britain denied. Not because the army is large, it is famously small, and not because the moat is wide, it is famously narrow. Denied on 1,000 years of record. One conquest, requiring the defender to fight 2 invasions in 3 weeks. One fleet scattered so completely that the winners gave the credit to the wind. One emperor who stared at the cliffs for 2 years and marched away. One dictator who set the date, demanded the sky as his own precondition, lost it, and canceled. And a standing arrangement whereby the island's final answer waits underwater, in an envelope, in a safe, in a place no enemy has ever found. 21 miles has never been 21 miles. Case number 8, closed. And your staff is already opening the next folder with the confidence of men who have not read it. The next defendant is a narrow ribbon of a country, shaped like the letter S, poor for most of its modern history, with no navy to speak of and jungle where its fortresses should be. Its file is different from every other in this cabinet because its defenders did not build walls. They went underground, entire cities of tunnels beneath the forest floor, hospitals, kitchens, barracks, invisible from above. Two of the most powerful militaries of the 20th century each spent roughly a decade fighting there, one from each side of the Cold War, and both went home. And its longer record is stranger still. 1,000 years of ejecting a neighbor 20 times its size, again and again, like a national tradition. That case file opens next. If you want your invasion plans rejected properly, hit subscribe, because the Iron Verdict Court is now in session.